To pivot data is to reorganize and summarize it in various ways, transforming detailed information into a more structured format. Pivot table has many parameters like data values, index, columns, and so on. Let's start with data parameter. Just like in pivot function, the data parameter here accepts a data frame. Just like the data parameter of the pivot function, the pivot table function data parameter also accepts a data frame, and from this data frame, sales DF, if we want to compute the total revenue generated from each product in this dataset sales DF will be used as the input in a data parameter. So if you compute the total revenue generated from each product in the dataset, the sales DF will be used. The sales DF will be used as a data input. The values parameter accepts scalar value or list like and is optional. So when values accept a scalar like price, it can help you to get the total price for each product. As you can see here, SPU sum to 400 and monitor to 200. This is the use of values parameter as price or scalar. So when you summarize the total sales value of each product in the dataset sales DF, you use values as a scalar, and here you specify it as a price. So from this sales DF data frame, to get the total sales of each product in the dataset sales DF, we specify values as a scalar. We specify values as a scalar. To summarize the total sales value for each product in the dataset sales DF, we use values as a scalar. Here price. When values accept a list like, for example, a tuple, a list itself, like price and quantity, set, and so on, we can do some computation using this feature. So, for example, to display the total quantity and the price for each manager, you should use values as a list of quantity and the price. To display the total quantity and the price for each manager from this data frame, we use values as a list of price and quantity. So you can display the total quantity and the price for each manager. If you omit the values parameter, all columns that are not used as indexes or columns in the pivot table will be aggregated. For example, here from this sales data frame, if you ignore or you omit values parameter, you will see that all columns that are not used as indexes or columns will be aggregated. The index parameter accepts columns name, grouper, array, or list of columns. So from this data frame, sales DF, if you want to compute the total sales revenue price for each combination of manager and the product in the sales DF, we will use index parameter to specify how data should be grouped. For example, here the index parameter will help us to specify how data should be grouped. Columns parameter accepts columns name, grouper, array, or list of columns, or groupers and arrays. To create a pivot table that will show the total price of each manager by product in the data frame, the columns parameter will be product in order to show the total price for each manager by product in the data frame, here DF. So let's create a data frame. With columns manager, Bob, product, price and create a data frame from this data. Press display it. Let's display it. From this data, we can create a pivot table to show the total price for each manager by product in the data frame DF. From this data frame, we can create a pivot table to show the total price for each manager by product in the data frame DF. As you can see, the total price for each manager, Alice and Bob, by product A, B, and C in this data frame cells, in this data frame DF. Also, from this data frame, we can also create a pivot table to show the total product for each, the total price for each manager. Also, from this data frame, we can the aggregate function parameter. This is the function that differentiates the pivot table function from the pivot function. When it can accept the list of functions, dictionary, or use the default mean. By default, the aggregate function finds the mean. So by default, from this sales DF, if you compute the average sales per manager, is the default when you don't specify the aggregate function. For example, here from this sales DF, if you don't specify the aggregate function, you will get the mean price for each manager. So when you pass a function like sum in the aggregate function For example, here you can summarize the total sales from this data frame by manager. By specifying the aggregate function here, sum. So to summarize total sales from this data frame by manager, you can pass a function in aggregate parameter. Like here, the sum is not the default mean now, it is a function passed in the aggregate function. As you can see, you can get the total price or total sales for each manager. So to compute highest and total values from this data frame, you have to pass a list of functions like sum and max to get the highest sum and to get the total values max all at once for each manager. You see, you get the sum and the highest value of the price for each manager. So here you could pass other functions. For example, here you pass median, you could pass mean as it is by default. The max value could pass variance, and so on. The field value parameter will specify the value to replace missing values, the nuns, in the resulting pivot table. Like here we have nuns in this resulting pivot table, and this we accept a value, a single value. If no other value is provided, none is used as the default value. For example, here we have not provided a field value, so none has been used in the missing values in the resulting pivot table. So by default, none is filled as a field value. So from this data frame, to if we don't specify the field value, for example here, let's comment this. If we don't specify the field value, see the missing values is not replaced, but we can replace it by something. For example, we can type missing value, missing, and here you could see you can type dash dash and any symbol to represent or to replace the nuns in the resulting pivot table. From this data frame, if you summarize the total quantity of products grouped by manager across different product and price combination, you will see the nones in the resulting pivot table. So by default, if you don't specify the field value, nones will be occurring the pivot in the resulting pivot table. If you want to fill the nones with, or replace them with another symbol or a word or a number, you would specify field value by a symbol that you wish. For example, here dash dash could be @ symbol and whatever. The margins parameter adds totals for each row and columns. It is a boolean and default to false, so it adds totals for each row and columns when set to true. So from this data frame, when you show the total sales, sum of price for each manager across different product, and you want to display, here is a default value. By default it is false or not provided, but when you set margins to true, the total value will be seen at the end. If you specify margins true, you will see it adds total for each row and column when set to true. The previous with margin default or false or not provided, no totals added for each row and column. But when you set margins to true, you see the total all and in columns and row. You could also decide to change the name of all, and here the margin name comes into handy. You could also decide to fill. Could also decide to name the totals. The totals. Here the margins name parameter would be used, and because it specifies the name of the row or columns that will contain the totals when margins true. By default, it says to all, as you can see here. So to to specify the name for the row or columns that are as totals, and the margin should be true. We should put the name for margins name. Here margins name, let's say total instead of all, total. You see, instead of all, the total has replaced the all default, the all which is default.